Today we're going to go over a quick primer on inspiration porn using the book The Truly Brave Princesses, and you're about to find out what makes them truly brave. It's going to be extraordinarily underwhelming. So first, let's go over a little bit of background on this book and the makers of this book. So this is part of the multiculturalism movement, which kind of started a little bit in the 80s and really ramped up in the 90s. The idea that as long as you insert people who look different or people of color, people from different countries, people with different abilities, as long as you insert them into a book and include them, you don't actually have to get any feedback or show how they're unique or smash any stereotypes. It's okay to put a pan-ethnic mishmash full of stereotypes in the book, and that counts as representation, and it should be good enough. What we have learned now that we live in this unholy year of 2020 is that just slapping a stereotype of an entire identity onto a book is not actually responsible representation. It actually furthers othering of people, and we're trying to move away from the multiculturalism aspect of the idea of just throwing everyone in a pot and everyone will be fine, and actually thinking of let's look critically at the assumptions that we make about people who are not traditionally represented in a positive way in our media. The multicultural movement kind of curates different people, almost like we're a museum exhibit for the view of wealthy, white, abled kids. That's the assumption of who's reading this. And what it just does is reinforces more stereotypes. So first, let's go over some background on, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, Sonja Wimmer, who was born in Munich and Brussels, presents to me as a white woman. She currently lives in Barcelona. All of her illustrations have this kind of creepy, distorted, not quite uncanny valley, but just like giant eyeballs, giant heads, kind of surreal. Not my thing, but I could get past it if the underlying messages weren't so terrible. This is actually one of her illustrated books that I actually like the illustrations on. I just really hate the execution. She has this, she's like hardcore on trying very hard to represent, but from a very white European abled perspective. So she throws people into her books, but you can tell that she's not actually like consulting with the people who have these identities to make sure that she's not including them kind of like almost like as a joke or a parody. Similar, like she has a book that just came out called Hia. I don't speak Spanish. Little One. And this is very common for her work, where you talk about different ethnicities. But if you notice, like, the white old lady just looks like, I don't know, a traditional European-American white grandma. Whereas you have, like, Asian people with these long, I don't know if you can see it, these long beards. You have, of course, Indigenous people with the braids, wearing headbands. Kind of like these, like the, is that a geisha? And, like, I'm not saying people don't sometimes look like this. It's usually for special occasions. It's a very small pocket of people within modern times who do dress like this. But like if you're gonna go for like representing Japan, having a sumo wrestler and a geisha, a little bit problematic, right? Whereas people like you have a white punk or like a clown. Is that supposed to be an ethnic thing? There's a little bit more diversity to her white characters. They're more individuals, whereas her people of color are more of like just a cartoon stereotype. So this isn't just a one-off thing. This is a pattern of behavior in her work. I'm sure that she thinks she's doing great things, but impact is more important than intent. And we have to think of who is she assuming is the audience for her work, and what messages are these kids picking up. Particularly what messages are the kids of color picking up from like the only time they see themselves represented, and this is true of me when I was little, is like in a very othering way that people dressed a billion years ago only for special occasions. She also does stuff like the book Sugar and Snails, which introduces a whole bunch of really nasty gender stereotypes, and then so that way at the end she can smash them and be like, no, all of those are nonsense. But the beginning of the book introduces a whole bunch of stereotypes that most modern kids haven't actually picked up yet. And it's not a bad book, but it's a pattern of behavior. Now, ironically, the idea of there being things like boys' books and girls' books, I think most of us are on the same page on that. It seems ridiculous. But this one, little one, has a girl on it, and guess what? They're making a boy version, which comes out in 2021. I haven't read it yet because it hasn't come out yet, but like, why? Why do we need two different books for the genders? Like, is it not, are we expecting that boys can't see themselves reflected in a book about a girl being important and interesting? She also has a pattern of working with other problematic authors, such as, I'm gonna butcher this, Anna Ulati, who wrote the book Walking Eagle, the Little Comanche Boy, which is exactly as white colonizer whitewashing as it sounds. So this pattern of othering and introducing stereotypes to young readers is, I feel, actively harmful, especially under the guise of trying to do good things, but actually just taking us a few steps backwards. The author of The Truly Brave Princesses is also, I think also the author of, no, this is a different book, does another book with Sonia Wimmer. So the author is Ariel Andres Almada, who is Argentinian and currently living in Germany. He and Wimmer have paired together for one other previous book, I think, which is one of my most detested books, called Walking Through a World of Aromas, in which a blind girl experiences basically a magical cure through the love and admiration of a sighted boy. Just like, the magical cure in itself is disgusting, the idea that people with disabilities need to be cured by an abled person or cured at all, and also the idea of a young girl's problems or challenges in life being magically solved by the interest and attention of a man is just and the illustrations are creepy. Okay, so with that background, let's talk about the title, The Truly Brave Princesses. Maybe this is a translation issue because I don't think either one of them speaks English as a first language. But someone published this and someone thought it was okay. Actually, no, Dolores Brown. I think Dolores Brown does speak English as a first language. Why? Oh, Ariel Andres Almada was the title of this one. Sorry, Dolores Brown is the author of this one. I got mixed up. I'm going to have to do more research on her. So what makes them truly brave is not what they do, but who they are. And that's basically the foundation of inspiration porn. Inspiration porn is the idea that you are moving through the world, surviving and existing as someone who is not the ideal. So people, particularly people with visible disabilities, get this a lot, where people point out, oh, you're so brave for like going to the grocery store, raising your kids, basic stuff that everyone else is just expected to do as a part of life. And it's almost like they are supposed to be lauded for not dying of misery or committing suicide because they're not the person that you typically see reflected in the middle of a sitcom TV show, which is gross. And that kind of lauding and that kind of praise for existing within your identity is ultimately insulting. So you have to wonder, what are these people doing that's actually brave? For the most part, nothing. They're just staying alive while not being thin, white, wealthy, and abled. Okay, let's dig into this. So, let's see. We start with Princess Anita. She's brave because she's a lady doctor and because she has a stay-at-home husband, or at least a husband who gets home before her. Keep in mind also the subtle thing where it's She does not usually wait for the prince to come home. It is he who usually waits for her. Now, keep in mind the person who isn't feeding into that capitalist industrial concept of like you have to be constantly productive. The person who is waiting up is, you know, drinking some tea in some cozy socks, kind of setting up that idea that like he's not trying that hard, but she's trying really hard. If you had a guy who was a doctor, he wouldn't really be called brave. I mean, now in coronavirus, yes, you're all heroes. But like, typically you don't walk up to a male doctor and say like, wow, you are so brave. It's not a thing. However, we do say that to women. And the idea of her being a doctor or even being the breadwinner and that's what makes her brave is profoundly insulting. Given that many women have been the breadwinner for like most of history. This kid is brave because she's got braces and also implied because she's black in public. That's really all she does. She likes to like surprise people on the subway. I don't know. This person is brave because she's a single mom. Like, wow, you're so brave. We've had single moms for basically the history of humanity. So the idea of a mom being brave because what is her alternative? Like, whether or not being single is a choice or not a choice, it's not really so much bravery so much as survival, tenacity, hardworkingness, but she's not truly brave just because she's a single mom. Here's a pan-Asian, pan-Muslim mishmash person who, you might notice this, white people and to a lesser extent black people in this book don't really have any ethnic markers. They're not supposed to be representing any culture outside of Europe. But everyone else kind of has these like, you can see the intent behind it to represent someone who's outside the white cultural norm. But when it's mishmashed like this, not as an individual in the way that an individual would dress, but mishmashed as in like, here's what I think a Muslim would dress like, it becomes flattening and paints non-white people as kind of monolithic. So anyway, Princess Nila is brave because she works and is a breadwinner and her husband is a stay-at-home dad. Also, she's Muslim in public. That's what makes her brave. Sonia Wimmer really loves white ladies in dreads. So this person is brave because she's working class and she works at a grocery store. It's entirely the thing that makes her brave. It is exhausting to be working class and work in retail, but I wouldn't call it brave. I would call it just like what you do to live. This kid is brave just because of her amblyopia. There's really nothing defining about her. She has a lazy eye, but her slam dunks are terrific, as if like those two things are mutually exclusive. But here we get into more of the ableism in the inspiration porn. We're going to pick this up a little bit as the book goes, but the thing that makes this child brave is having a disability. And she doesn't do anything. Just, gah! This person is brave because I guess she presents as black and is a librarian. Oh, she also dares not to have... Oh, she's divorced. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to mention. Almost all of these women are defined by their marital status, which is so weird. The first thing that, I don't know, for some people, maybe your marital status does define you, and that's like a big highlighter of your identity. But I like to think the thing that makes me brave is not the fact that, like, my husband carries his weight on childcare, or that I'm a single parent, or, I'm not a single parent, or that, like, I was raised by a single parent, or, like, or being single. I think, yeah, Princess Gilda is single, and that's the highlight of her. This is the first thing you hear about her. Princess Gilda is single. Like, can you imagine that on your obituary? Like, the first thing that identifies you is your connection to another, like, your marital status. Bah! Ew! Ew! Luckily, she doesn't give the marital status on the children, because at least there's, I don't know. But yeah, what makes this woman brave is the fact that she's divorced. why is that even in the book? This person who's kind of a pan-Asian mishmash of, I don't know, South and East Asian attire, and of course she's using what appears to be a hospital wheelchair, which that's another kind of horn in the bonnet. People never draw actual real life wheelchairs that a person would actually use every day. They just draw like random, I don't know, they do a Google image search for wheelchairs and they find hospital wheelchairs and that's what they draw. But I don't know, as an Asian person, I don't walk around dressed like that. Just not like, these things are really hard to put on and they're a little uncomfortable. So Princess Liang speaks French, German, English, and Chinese, and that's kind of interesting because while French, German, and English are connected languages but unique and specified, Chinese, which could be like, I don't know, 10 to more languages, is just Chinese. Like, it doesn't say she speaks Mandarin or Cantonese, it just says she speaks Chinese. So it's really interesting, the idea of Chinese, and this is what she pictures, presumably a Chinese person looks like. What? And that mishmash of like, Chinese is one language. It's almost like we've heard teachers in our school call things like the African language. It just kind of betrays how you see like the other as like one big conglomerate, whereas French, English, and German are unique, specific languages. Now, another white woman who has really no markers of ethnicity, like she doesn't look particularly English or Irish or Scottish or whatever. She's just like a modern looking person. She's brave because she proposed. That's it. She likes surfing, and she proposed, and that's what makes her brave. I guess you can probably guess why the author and the makers of this book thought that Princess Dolores is brave, this 14-year-old. It doesn't really say whether or not she has any boyfriends or anything, because I think it's just assumed that she wouldn't, because the makers are, I'm going to just assume, thin. It's interesting to see who is not defined by their marital status. People with disabilities and people with different bodies than you usually see on TV are not defined by their marital status, because the makers are making some assumptions about who is desirable and who is not desirable. She really doesn't do anything. She likes dogs, and she has a pretty voice, which is just like an extra dig. That's what people say about fat girls when they want to be nice. You have a pretty face, or you have a pretty voice. But the assumption behind inspiration porn is that she is brave for being in public with her body the way that it is. These two, do you think that Princess Lois and Princess Maggie are brave because of their careers as a dentist and a post office worker? Nope, they're brave because they're lesbians. I mean, like, yeah, in some countries, sure, it is brave to be outwardly lesbians, in many places in the U.S. as well, but ew. It's just ew. And Princess Agnes is brave because she's old. Yeah, she's brave because she's old. And of course, we had to know her marital status, which is widowed but dating. I guess that is also maybe why she's brave, because she's not completely inactive, as we typically stereotype older women. But the idea of someone being brave because of the shape of their body, or how old they are, or their disability, or their status as a lesbian is it's just, come on, do you get it? Like, right? Is it like, does that sit well with you? Because it grosses me out. Princess Caroline has Down syndrome, and she's brave because she has Down syndrome, because of course to be disabled or have a disability in the world makes you automatically brave. It does not mention her marital status. I wonder why. It's almost like the makers don't realize that people with Down syndrome do get married. Wow. Like, they date, they get married, or sometimes they don't, and it doesn't matter, and it really has nothing to do with their bravery. Princess Katori, we see some pan-Indian mishmash of the headband and the feathers in her hair, the feathers for no reason, the vaguely dream-catchery earrings. And she's brave because she cohabitates with her husband, but presumably isn't married because it doesn't say she's married. But also she's brave because she's indigenous to Turtle Island, I guess. And because Princess Katori never got married, but she lives with the prince and they love each other very much. Like that's the top. She's highlighted in a book. This character was solely created just to point out that she cohabitates but is not married with her partner. Princess Esther, which I immediately think of Queen Esther. So I guess like she's brave for being ambiguously Jewish, but she's not. Is a journalist, and you know why she's brave? It's because she has a lisp. Yeah, you thought it was just gonna be like a person, like a kid being brave because she did something cool. No, she doesn't really do cool stuff. She's got a lisp and she exists. Very, very brave. Princess Nin is, I don't know, it's kind of like a what is this? Like a Cambodian? I don't know what kind of crown that is. This one, she's legitimately brave. She's a firefighter. She's wearing like firefighter outfit. She's on a ladder. Like she took off her helmet so she could put on a crown for some reason. That is confusing to me. And that's actually kind of a brave thing to be a firefighter. So like, cool. Like if the book was more along that, sure. But we're heading towards the end. And then you have an astronaut, which actually kind of is cool and is sufficiently brave that I think it's worth writing a book about. Taking off her helmet in the middle of space doesn't seem like a great idea, but okay. Sure. Princess Zoe, who is only 27 years old and already an astronaut, legitimately brave.